You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Shandak, featured columnist Jay Belstein is with me today on CYInterview. We welcome veteran bodybuilder and champion Doug Brignole, a Mr. America and Mr. Universe. Doug was a friend of frequent CYInterview guest Ric Drasin, who recently passed away. On Ric's popular YouTube show, Ric's Corner, Doug was also a frequent guest. Doug, thanks so much for being with us on CYInterview today to remember Ric Drasin, among other topics. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. So I just want to begin with, what are your memories of our friend, your friend, Ric Drasin, and what do you feel people should know about him?
Well, I mean, he's a remarkable person. I mean, you're going to have a hard time finding anyone who had done so much in one lifetime. I mean, to be a bodybuilder and a professional wrestler and an actor and on commercials and a online host, and an excellent host, by the way, and a graphic artist. He drew the Gold's Gym logo and a lot of other logos. He did his own, video editing. So, he was a guitarist, a musician. I mean, it's hard to find anyone who's done so many different things. Father, husband, friend. I mean, he had a lot of labels. He did a lot of things.
What did you enjoy, quickly, before I throw it to Jay, about being on his show?
Well, I was on his show about 30 or so times, and I think we had a very unique dynamic. I mean, I think a lot of people used to get on his show and expect to be asked questions, expect to be interviewed. And I never did that with Ric. We bantered. That was the beauty of and that's why people enjoyed watching us together, is because it was like we were co-hosting. I wasn't just sitting there waiting for him to ask me questions. I was asking him questions. I was joking with him and rolling with the punches and throwing a few of my own. And it was a lot of fun, doing that kind of thing with him. And I think that it was a unique thing for him and for me to find a friend that we could do that with.
Okay.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for being here. After watching you for so long, I feel like I know you forever, even though we're just meeting under these tough circumstances. Tell me, how did you meet Ric originally?
Well, I started bodybuilding at the age of 15 in my home, and then I joined Bill Pearl's, at 14 at home, joined Bill Pearl's gym at the age of 15, and was just consuming the magazines. I was just hooked. So Muscular Development, Iron Man magazine, Muscle and Fitness, Flex, all those magazines, Muscle Digest, those were just my Bibles. I couldn't wait for the next issue to come out, and I would find the physiques that were my favorite, and I was just hungry for knowledge, and I would go to the health food store, and I would say, teach me about nutrition. I couldn't get enough. And so Ric was in all those magazines, in one way or the other. I mean, he was of the Arnold era, Arnold, Zane, Danny Padilla, Robbie Robinson. So right around the, late 70s is when I sort of entered the scene. And he was in all the magazines in one form or another, in an ad or in an article or something. And then I did actually meet him. And, social media has a lot to do with bringing the world smaller. A lot of the people that I idolized back then, I'm now chatting with. Muhammad Makawi. All these friends of mine that I now interact with regularly, thanks to social media. So at some point through social media, I ended up meeting Ric, and we arranged a lunch, and this was probably around 2010. Not that long. It was not a long time ago, even though I knew of him for a long time, and he had heard of me. And so we had lunch at the place in the Valley in Van Nuys, and we just hit it off. We became good friends. We started doing shows, and we'd go to lunch together, and I'd help him with all kinds of things. I'd do some of his grocery shopping for him. Toward the end, I was bathing him when he needed that. I was helping him in and out of the chair or the walker or whatever. So, I mean, I was like a son to him, I think.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because Ric came on with us, first started coming on about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And at times, get off the podcast and so forth, and we just chat, and a lot of times we just had phone calls. where it had, nothing to do with doing a show. Ric was a friend, and you would frequently come up because we'd always be discussing the guests and all, and Jerry Branham, who would come on, and so forth. And it's very interesting that he had you on, because Ric was about the golden age. And to me, the golden age of bodybuilding was an age that combined the best of not only outsized musculature, but aesthetics. And you have continued to hold the torch high for an aesthetic treatment of the body, not just, mass for mass sake, which is, I think, where we've gotten to today. I'm not knocking it, it's just not my cup of tea. Right. And, you have, when I think of the great aesthetic physiques, I think of Frank Zane, I think of Serge Nubret, who passed away a few years ago, and I think of you. Of course, you're from a different generation.
I was a little younger.
Well, quite a bit younger, actually. Did you ever train with Ric?
No, I never trained with Ric. When I was 16, Jim Morris was my training partner. And then, of course, being at Real Pros Gym, I met Boyer Coe, and I met Lou Ferrigno, and I met Chris Dickerson. I made friends. In fact, you recently posted a picture on my Facebook with Chris Dickerson and Jim Morris at the grand opening of my gym in Pasadena in 1984. I mean, I was really friendly with these guys. But most of the time, I was a very stubborn person in terms of training. I was not. In fact, even Bill would joke with me because I would ask him questions, and then he would say, well, are you going to listen to me this time, or are you just, taking up my time? Because a lot of times, I would weigh what they would say. I wouldn't necessarily take everything as gospel. I did it good-heartedly, and I've always been respectful of these people, and I've never, ever said anything negative about their methods of training or anything else, even if I didn't agree with it. But, I am pleased to be included in the group of symmetrical bodybuilders that include Bob Paris and, Samir Bannout and Francis Benfato and et cetera. I think it's amusing because I think I'm the only person of all the names we've mentioned that wasn't a pro bodybuilder. I never turned pro. I stayed an amateur the whole time.
Interesting. I didn't even think of that. By the way, did you ever participate in any amateur contests back east, or it was all on the West Coast?
Well, I competed in the '83 Mr. America, which was in Florida.
That was in Florida. Anything in the New York? Anything in the New York area where I originally hail from?
No, I never competed in New York.
There was some.
Gone there if there would have been an event, and I was going to New Jersey somewhat frequently when Bob Gruskin was alive, and he was having me be a judge for the NABA East Coast shows. I was there every September for about 5 or 6 years, and then he passed away a year or two ago, and so I stopped going. I think that was Pittsburgh.
When we go back into the ether of what I would call modern bodybuilding, which I'll call modern bodybuilding, I don't know, probably the last 60 years, Night of the Champions in New York was, of course, very, very big and quite a name from the past. Somebody who was a friend of Ric's, by the way, who passed away. I'm not quite sure. Was it 4 years ago? Leroy Colbert.
Right.
Leroy actually had his health food store, I believe, on the west side of Manhattan. I mean, New York was quite a hotbed, and I believe Joe Weider originally had his warehouse in New Jersey, now that you mention New Jersey. And I think that's where Dave Draper actually started working for Joe Weider, and then Weider went to the West Coast and so forth, and bodybuilding really took off where you are on the West Coast and all. And you had mentioned, of course, you trained in Bill Pearl's gym. Ric trained in... Did Ric train in when Ric trained, was it the original Golds, or did he train wasn't there a place called the Dungeon prior to that wasn't actually the original Golds, but it was in Venice, and then there was the Dungeon?
So I don't know if there was a different gym called the Dungeon, but I do know that Ric was there on the ground floor of the original Main Street Golds gym. He was there. He was one of the guys, along with, all the other guys that came from all over the world. Obviously, Arnold came from Austria, but it came from the East Coast, came from everywhere to Venice Beach to train at Gold's Gym, because that had become the new Mecca thanks to the association between Joe Gold and Joe Weider, and the fact that, the Weider magazine was always photographing the pro bodybuilders there at Gold's Gym. It brought people from all over the place. So he was Joe, that when Joe Gold sold the gym, it still didn't have that bald-headed guy with the barbell logo. In fact, it wasn't until Ken Sprague, which was the third owner of Gold's Gym, that Ken Sprague said to Ric Drasin, who was a graphic artist, hey, why don't you draw me a little sketch of a Mr. Clean kind of guy holding a barbell? And so literally Ric Drasin sketched that on a napkin at a coffee shop in the Valley. And that became the most iconic logo in the world. That is the most visible logo ever seen anywhere in the world now that he drew that on a little napkin. But that was the third owner of Gold's Gym by that time.
And then he went on to draw the gorilla logo for World Gym, did he not?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think the place I recalled as the dungeon was the Muscle Beach Gym, which I think was the early 60s in Santa Monica, and then there was Gold's, and things kind of shot up from there. We want to have you back, and of course we're not going to stop talking about Rick, and he left a big footprint, and I know that his people on YouTube are going to continue to have some of the wonderful content he had, and to the extent that we can bring on folks who have that kind of information, we certainly want to. Tell us and to our listening audience, since you'll be new to a lot of people who read and listen to CYInterview, tell us what you're up to now. Tell us about your phenomenal book and your certification, please.
Well, I started working out at the age of 14. I competed in my first contest at the age of 16. It was a Teenage Mr. Compton contest. And I was hooked. By the time I was 19, I won Teenage America and Teenage California. I won Mr. California at the age of 22, won my division in Mr. America in 1986, won my division in Mr. Universe in 1986. And so by the time I retired from competition this last November, at the age of 59, that's 43 years after my first competition at the age of 16. So I don't know if anyone has the record, but I think I'm one of the ones who had the longest trajectory of competitions. I owned a gym in Pasadena for about 11 years, did that, and of course I've written for Ironman Magazine a lot. I co-authored one book called $1 Million Muscle, which is actually a university sociology book. I was invited to analyze the fitness industry sociologically.
Wow.
From a behavioral standpoint, advertising, false advertisement, myths, false beliefs, women bodybuilding, steroids, all the things that would be involved in the sociology of bodybuilding. And then this new book that I've just finished is called The Physics of Resistance Exercise, which is entirely mine and entirely about how to train wisely, intelligently. This was never pointed out to me, and it's shocking to me that no one ever before me pointed out the fact that all of our limbs, even our torso, our head, our neck, our feet, those are all levers. And they're all being pulled on by muscles, which are basically, part of the system of physics, part of, classical mechanics. So, it's foolish to not analyze exercises from the perspective of physics, because you can load a muscle with 90 pounds of resistance, let's say, and that muscle doesn't know whether the way you're lifting, the exercise that you're selecting, is loading that muscle with 90% of the 100 pounds you're lifting, or whether it's loading that muscle with 30% of the 300 pounds you're lifting. Either way, it's 90 pounds.
And I think one of the great things that I've gained from you, Doug, over the years, and thank you very much, is that it's not simply about lifting greater and greater weight in a way that's inefficient and can, quite frankly, over time take toll on your joints, your back, all kinds of other things. It's a matter of moving the weight in the direction that the weight's supposed to go, which a lot of times means you don't have to use the most gigantic weights on earth, and you're still getting a superior workout. Am I right or wrong?
Well, yes. I mean, it's what it boils down to is that there's three things that play a role in the quality of the stimulation and the efficiency of the exercise, meaning the investment of energy versus the load that muscle is actually getting. So one is the direction of anatomical motion. Every body part, every muscle has a specific movement, anatomical movement. And the closer you mimic that movement, the bigger percentage of contribution that muscle will play. As you move away from that specific direction, pretty soon it's getting 90%, 80%, 70%, 50% of the stimulation it could be getting. For example, parallel bar dips do not move the upper arm the same way a flat dumbbell press does. A flat dumbbell press does actually mimic the precise movement of the pectorals. Parallel bar dips do not. They don't fully elongate the pecs, they don't fully shorten the pecs. So any participation of the pecs is going to be inadequate for pectoral stimulation. So you look at the anatomical movement, that's number one. The other is the direction of the resistance. The direction of resistance should be precisely in the opposite direction of the concentric or the positive part of the movement, right? So if you're doing a torso rotation with a medicine ball, you're rotating left to right, but that medicine ball is not pulling opposite your movement. It's going vertical. It's going toward the ground. So your left to right movement is completely unchallenged. That would be like you lying down on your side with a dumbbell and doing dumbbell curls while lying on your side. That's how foolish that is. You are not challenging the movement. Okay, so that's one of the things related to the direction of resistance. Alignment has to do with it. The resistance curve, making sure that the motion that let's say if you're doing a curl, that you're getting more resistance at the beginning of the range of motion and less at the end, because muscles are always stronger at the beginning and weaker at the end. And the last category is the neurology of it. There are certain things that are happening neurologically when we exercise that are either making things easier or making things harder to do what you want to do. So, for example, this thing called bilateral deficit, which means it's easier to curl the right arm first and then the left arm second than it is to curl both arms, both dumbbells simultaneously. There's a weakness that is triggered neurologically when you try to do both sides at the same time. Another one is that two muscles that oppose each other cannot fire at the same time. So when you're doing curls, your tricep is shutting off. Well, that's fine, but because you're not even paying attention to your tricep when you're curling, but it's not fine when you're squatting, because when you're loading the glutes, which are hip extensors, you're deactivating the hip flexors, one of which is the rectus femoris, 1/4 of your quadricep.
Now tell me so that because this is just fascinating. We're going to have you back multiple times to really unpack this. Where can it? Please give us the name of the book again, and where can people find it? Can they get it on Amazon? Do they have to go to your site?
Well, there's multiple places. You can get it from Amazon. It's called The Physics of Resistance Exercise. You can get it on Amazon, but only if you're in the U.S. It's not offered overseas. You can get it at the publisher's website, which is healthylearning.com, and you can get it at my website, which is dougbrignole.com.
Okay, well, phenomenal, and we're going to put that up along with the article that accompanies this audio, and we're absolutely going to have you back, and certainly I'm sure we'll have some more Ric stories, and it's been Go ahead.
I may continue Ric's show.
That would be phenomenal. That would be phenomenal.
And I will literally keep it Ric's Corner. I am your host, Doug Brignole. Welcome to Ric's Corner. And I will have guests, just like he had guests from the Golden Era. And and I've already got them lining up. I have Muhammad Makawi that wants to be on it. I have Steve Davis that wants to be on it. I can bring Linda Murray. I can bring a lot of people on there that would just be fabulous guests.
I think that would be a phenomenal idea, and I think the community really needs it. And I'll just close with this. I don't know how much you follow all the different personalities and YouTube fitness personalities and so forth. When you started talking about the sociology and some of the things that go on, I'll just say things like perhaps people proclaiming to use weights and showing that they're lifting something and maybe it's not a real weight, or people who say they're natural and they're not, or people claiming they do a certain routine that they don't really do. I think it has a deleterious effect on somebody who really wants to go and get the best information possible to train. And one of the things I like so much about you and about Ric is just bringing honest information and then letting the consumer, the person who was going to get out there and work out, you know, kind of try things out for themselves, but with honest info. So,
by the way, you know that in the fitness industry, it is just legendary that there's always been a lot of falsehood. Period. I mean, this is the snake oil, you know, capital right here, the fitness industry, because it's so easy for someone with a good physique to appear to use or take or do what they're trying to solicit. And there's a long history of this. I mean, Larry Scott did not develop those arms from preacher curls, and yet that's what he said. Now, he might have falsely believed it, or maybe he knew better, but obviously lots and lots of people have done preacher curls and never developed Larry Scott arms. And, I mean, look at the earliest was, you know, the Atlas course. Charles Atlas used isometrics and claimed he developed his physique using isometrics, and everyone knows he was a weightlifter. He held
indeed, yeah, absolutely, indeed. And by the way, I can testify here as you're speaking because I did my share of preacher curls, and I have short muscle bellies and not aesthetic biceps. But we're going to close on that note. We're definitely going to have you back. Doug Brignole, absolutely fantastic, and we'll talk more about our good friend Ric Drasin. What a loss. Rest in peace. Chris, why don't you take us out?
So for bodybuilding veteran Doug Brignole, featured columnist Jay Belsine, and CY Interview, I'm Chris Yannick.